Hey everyone, it's John with KGTropicals and KGTropicals.com. We've made it to part 7 of our video series about breeding African cichlids, and in today's episode we're going to talk about raising the fry. This is the fun part. This is why we do it. So leading up to this, we talked about everything to get you prepared for raising the fry. Now it's time to do it. So we're going to talk about tanks, we're going to talk about food, we're going to talk about all kinds of different things that has to do with raising your fry. Now, the first thing I want to tell you is, don't be scared of it. It's not intimidating, it's not a hard thing to do. Raising fry is really no different than taking care of adults. They do need some special attention, and there are some things that you can do that will make them grow faster and be healthier. But really, if you think about it, it's no different than just taking care of fish. So, the first thing that I want to talk about is the tanks. We've told you to get ready to do this. We want to have a couple of fry tanks starting out with 10-gallon tanks, and then we want to move up to a grow-out tank. One of the things I didn't tell you in that video is that the rate of a fish's growth is going to be dramatically impacted by the size tank that they're in. A good example of that would be if we had a batch of fry that was 40 fish, and we took 20 of them, and as soon as they were either released from the mother or we took them out of the egg tumbler and put 20 of them in a 10-gallon tank and put the other 20 in a 55-gallon tank, you come back 3 months later and I promise you the ones that were in the 55-gallon tank are going to be dramatically bigger than the ones that are in the 10. So keep that in mind when you're setting up your grow-out tanks or your initial fry tanks. The size of the tank is really going to impact the rate of growth. Now, the other thing that's going to impact the rate of growth is the quality of the water. One of the things that I could preach every day is the more water changes you do in a fry tank, the faster they're going to grow also. So if you're someone who has a large tank for your fry and you're doing water changes any available opportunity you can, your fish are going to grow ridiculously fast. If you put them in a 10-gallon tank and you're doing a water change 25% once a week, they're going to be fine. They're just not going to grow as fast as one that is really given a lot of fresh water and, you know, with the water changes and everything. So water changes are critical. Just so you know, when we move out into our hatchery out there into the warehouse, our fish are going to receive a 20% water change every day. Now, we're not going to do that with siphon hoses and buckets and all of that. We're going to set up a system that's going to do that for us, and we'll talk about that in another video once we start setting up that hatchery out there. So we're going to do that though because we want the fish to grow as fast as possible. We're growing these fish so that we can sell them and make money. So for us, it's absolutely critical that they grow as fast as we can grow. So water changes and tank size critical to the rate of growth for your fry. Now the other thing's pretty obvious, and that's food. Feeding fry is not complicated. It's not as hard as you might think. If you went on to a forum and you posted a question, what should we feed our fry? You're going to get a million different answers. There's going to be people that are going to say it has to be baby brine shrimp, live, newly hatched baby brine shrimp. Then there's going to be people that are going to tell you you have to mix up all of these different ingredients and freeze it in your freezer in ice cube containers, and that's the kind of food that you have to give to them. Folks, it's not that difficult. It's not as complicated as that. Feeding your fry is as easy as feeding your adults. But you have to start out with something that they can eat. And so what we do is we start out with these. Now I'm not paid by anybody. You know, I'm just showing you what we use. Omega-1, the Super Color Cichlid Flakes. Now, we've used a lot of different flakes, and they've all worked fine. We like the Omega-1. That's what we're using right now. One can like that will go a long way, and the reason for it, because we'll take about half of the flakes out of the can, leaving the other half in, and shake it up rigorously. And that'll basically bust up the flakes into a pretty fine powder. And that's what we'll use for newborn fry. Now when they get a little bit older, what Lisa does is she mixes up something that she calls a medley. And let me find it here. I'm going to try to put this up to the camera so that you can see the pellets that we use. They are really small, very fine little pellets. And we'll mix that in with the flakes for fry that are a little bit bigger, you know, a month old or so, and we'll mix that in with the flakes. Now, what is that stuff? Well, it is identical, but it's not this product, but it's identical to the NLS Grow. High protein content. It's basically a formula for growth. Now, we used to use the Grow when we had like 5 fry tanks. But when we got to the point where we had 70, feeding the NLS Grow I'll be honest, it just got to be a little bit too expensive. We found a company, and again, I'm not paid, but I'm just going to tell you, it's premiumfishfood.com. They sell this food in bulk. Now, they sell it in smaller containers too, but we buy it in 20-pound bags, which makes sense for us. So that's what we start them out on. We don't give them the pellets right away because they're too small and it would take them too long to eat them. We start them out on the flakes, ground up really fine. We don't go as far as using the pre-manufactured newborn fry food that's basically powder. African cichlid fry are big enough. They're tiny, but they're big enough to accept finely ground up flakes. You don't need to go as far as making it a powder. So we start them off on that. We gradually move them up to Lisa's medley, which is the ground up flakes with some of the very, very micro pellets mixed in. When they're a little older, we'll give them just the pellets, which again is exactly like the Grow formula from NLS. It's a growth enhancing fry food. Now, once they get a little bit bigger, once they can fit it into their mouth, we will switch to this. It is another pellet. It's a little bit bigger, but it's still pretty small. I don't know how to, show you to gauge the size. But that's a little bit bigger pellet. It's probably twice the size of the original pellet. That is a product from Southern Delight. Again, I'm not advertising here. I'm just telling you what we use. And it's their Spirulina formula fry food. Not fry food, but small pellet. That's what we'll give them once they get a little bit bigger, and they're big enough to accept that. Not to be able to chew on it like an apple, but actually fit it in the entire thing in their mouth. That's when we'll switch them to that. And once they get a little bit bigger, we move up in pellet size. I am a firm believer in pelleted food. That's what we've always fed our fish. It's easier on the tanks. It's easier to monitor how much food is being eaten. Pelleted food is my food of choice. And I also have had much better luck with sinking pellets versus floating pellets with African cichlids. Some of them don't. Some of them will go wherever the food is and they don't care. But we have a lot of fish that are lazy and they don't want to go up to the top to get the food. So that's what we do as far as our food goes. Start them off very, very small and just work them up in size, and until they can graduate to a larger pellet. It's hard to show you here. That's the larger pellet that we feed right there. And again, it's from that same website, premiumfishfood.com. I'm not a paid endorser of that website, but it's a great website. That's where we buy our food. If you want to use the same stuff we're using, buy it there. But if you don't want to do all of that and you can pick up NLS, it's the same thing basically as the NLS growth formula, or Grow. So it's that simple. Heavy on the water changes. I have read, actually, let me take that back. Lisa has read and then told me about articles that she's read where there was actually studies done. Fish with 7, 8, 9, 10 water changes a day. They monitored the growth rate of these fish, and it's dramatic, the difference in the rate of growth when you're doing water changes and constantly providing these fish with fresh water. The size of the tank is important, remember that, and remember to make sure that they can fit the food in their mouth and get a good quality food. I mean, I don't really know of any bad foods out there. I haven't had anybody tell me, oh, I fed that food and all my fish died. I've never heard that. So you're a cichlid keeper, you know well enough to know, give them food that's made for cichlids. There are foods out there, in fact, that are made specifically for African cichlids. They're easy to find. They got pictures of African cichlids on the packaging. So it's not complicated. Feeding your fry is not complicated. Make sure they can fit it in their mouth, and they're going to be fine. So before, I'm going to get questions from people, and they're going to say, John, how long is it going to take for my fish to be 2 inches or 3 inches? John, how long is it going to take before my fish will be big enough to sell? Please don't ask me that, because I don't know your situation, and I'm not going to be able to go through with every single person that emails me every tank that they have, how many times they're feeding them, how many times you're doing water changes. I'm not going to be able to do all of that. There's no way I'm going to be able to tell you how fast your fish are going to grow. So please don't ask those questions. I mean, ask as many questions as you want, but that's an impossible question to answer. That's why I'm saying don't ask that. So have fun with it. These fish are fun to watch grow. They grow ridiculously fast. They're going to start out looking like little grains of rice with big old eyeballs, and they're going to grow, and once they get to 2.5 inches, they're going to start showing their colors. You'll be able to start separating the males from the females. It's exciting and it's fun. Keep it that way. Don't get stressed out about it. Taking care of fry is fine. It's fine. It's fun. Keep it that way. All right? So now, on the next episode, this is going to be a big one. This is the one I get so many questions about. It makes my head spin. The head spins so much I go bald. Getting rid of the fry. I said in the very first video that might sound like a mean kind of a title, but it's part of the deal. I mean, unless you've got 100 tanks and you're just going to keep all these fish as pets, then you don't need to worry about this part. But if you're doing this in your living room or in your basement and you're wanting to maybe make a couple extra dollars to support your hobby, or you want to start a business, you're going to have to think about getting rid of the fry. So we're going to talk about that in the next episode, which will be episode 8. I'm excited. We're starting to wrap this thing up. So thank you so much for watching. Have fun raising those fry, and we'll see you on the next video.